Well, we have liftoff. Hey, welcome to this week's edition, episode, installment, video, show, whatever you want to call it, soundbite. Certainly not a podcast yet, but maybe, who knows, of the
podcast. Really?
The British Electric Blues Show. Jeepers, Andrew, get it right. Look, couple of things. Welcome, Simon, my co-host.
Good morning. How are we doing? Hope you're good.
I'm very happy. Always happy to see you, and always good to jump on and spend an hour and a half with you on a Sunday evening.
Sunday morning. I don't know, it's 6:30. It's fine.
Well, you get the short end of the straw, but yeah.
Well, yes, and when we get to September, it's going to be shorter, isn't it? Because all the clocks turn around.
Yeah. Well, that's always a bit of a pain in the ass, isn't it, to get our heads around that what is it, time adjustment?
We get a 2 hour, don't we? So all of a sudden, I go back to 3:30 in the morning. One fine day in the middle of the night. Yes, that's me. No, it's all right. Well, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. But
okay.
As far as I'm concerned, it's an opportunity, and it's fun. To come and talk about the things we like with like-minded people.
Well, I always appreciate it, and certainly getting messages, from Kubrick Lover recently. I think you got the same message. Where he said, that he enjoys what we do. Dave sent me a message. He enjoyed the last show that we gave, and I gave him a little bit of stick and said to him, it'll even be better if you jumped on and actually did a bloody show with Simon and I. Yeah. So I'm waving the stick a little bit there. But
Guitar Hack. Good morning, Guitar Hack. How you doing? Hope you're good.
G'day, Hack. And it was also nice getting some comments from Great Vanzini, who's always a popular person when he jumps on and does some shows with us. So I look forward to doing some more. Just before we hit the show, I haven't had a chat, Simon, with Chad yet. I've left a couple of messages with him. So the usual story, we've got Chad coming on with us. And have you had any feedback at all from our friend Carlos?
I have not, but I've been really busy this week. It's been a wild and crazy week, so I've not contacted him much. But it's we'll see. It's yeah. Oh, well, I'll keep harassing him about it. He'll come on eventually. Come and show us his Brian May guitar.
Yeah. Well, if he ever is going to be in a position to rewatch the show, I just want to reiterate with him that he has a permanent invitation to join us.
Come on, it'd be good.
So that's pretty good. It was interesting. I was doing a bit of channel surfing, YouTube surfing earlier before I shot out and did a few bits and pieces, and Hack was on live, and he was jamming away, and he was going for it, and he was locked into it, and everyone was on the chat saying, "Couldn't hear you, can't hear you." Hack forgot to flick the switch.
Oh, bad luck. The basic thing. I'm halfway through looking at his Les Paul shootout. I don't know. I don't give it away. Don't give away the ending. Someone dies in the end. So I'm looking forward to finding out which one's in for the axe. Literally. Talking of going live, I'm a beginner. Well, living up to your name, Hack, obviously, is it's. Did you see the? I don't know if you saw it. Did you see the last from not yesterday, but a week ago? The Rhett Shaw live gig he did. It's worth checking out.
No,
check it out. It's fantastic. Basically, they converted, I think, his basement in his house, or maybe his parents' house or somewhere, into this kind of, where they could play live. socially distanced and masks and all of that. Yeah, but then when they put together a load of stuff, and it sounded really good, really good. But this is playing live on the internet as well, which is proved quite difficult. Obviously, they're all in the same room, not in different rooms, so they're not doing what we're doing. But check it out because it was really good, really good. Sound was really good, and they did an hour, and they're going to do another one in August. They're sort of making it a regular thing.
Well, if there's one good thing about this lockdown period that we've had globally, a lot of the artists and YouTube media personalities that we've come to know over the years and recent months have become more and more accessible. We've had some jam sessions, some impromptu interviews, some interviews and discussions about music that they've done in the past, and it's been bloody enthralling. I've been captivated by a few of them.
Yeah. Good morning, Great Vanzini. I've been enjoying a couple of your what's it Fender Highway 1 Strat review, and what's the one with the semi hollow with the P90 I was watching yesterday? So I'm making my tea. Yeah. That sounded really good as well. So so really well done, Great Vanzini. That sounded great. I like that semi hollow. He was doing a blonde semi hollow. I don't think it might have been a guild. Might have been a guild. No, it might not. Anyway, but it sounded great. Really good. Lovely. That.
I saw one where it was a Gretsch and a Reverend, and his Highway 1.
The Highway 1 is the one after the Highway 1, I think, the one he did yesterday. I can't remember what it is. I'm an idiot.
I'm sure he'll tell us.
But go back to the live thing. There's been some cool stuff going on, hasn't there? There's have you seen Joe Bonamassa's been doing some live talk things, interviewing various people? They've been good. I've enjoyed those a lot. Morning, Sonia. How are you doing? Hope you're good.
G'day, Sonia. Yeah, I've been captivated by Bonamassa, and also it's been a subject of a few shows that we've done, and probably a few more to come. Bobby Whitlock's short little snips. Very digestible bites. I like that. That's good. Compared to a lot of the other shows that we watch, that could go for an hour and a half. And sometimes, if you're like me, I have to come back to those shows 3 or 4 times. And that's okay. But when you get 10 minutes, it's like, it's during a coffee break.
Absolutely, yes. I know what you mean. Some people I know who go on for an hour and a half. Yeah, mentioning no names. Simon, Andrew.
Okay.
So there's been lots to enjoy, and there's been lots to I think the difficulty with people, and obviously Rex Audio obviously got a lot of people to sponsor him, and he got was it Universal Audio just to give him quite a lot of stuff, and some other people, mic stands and stuff, and also a lot of people kind of donated money as well, as if they were going to a gig. Sounds
that's correct. Great Vanzini.
He did, yeah. I saw the pictures. Hack and his friend. Who is that bloke in the baseball cap?
Yeah. I like Quentin James's comment. Who's that with Hack?
That's exactly it. Yes. Yeah. Who's that with that famous bloke Hack? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so part 2 of the great British blues album. Blues. So so the difficulty for me in picking my number 5 was which one. So I went for a collection of CDs and records that came out last year. So I went for this one here, which is it came out I think about approximately a year ago. Fleetwood Mac, Before the Beginning, 68 to 1970. So if you have a look there on the graphic, it says Rare Live and Demo Sessions. Now, to be fair, most of the songs have been re-released. The good thing about this unit here is that it came as a package in a booklet form.
Cool. Yeah.
Some background information, which is always interesting. Not necessarily on the band, but background information on the songs, where the songs were recorded. And if you have a look here, Simon, it's got CD1 has got 14 songs, CD2 15, and CD3 12 songs. So from a perspective of not a greatest hits perspective, but from an all round perspective, I've picked that one over the Boston Tea Party, which
is the live album, yeah.
I was going to, but the good thing with this unit here, this compilation, when it came out, it's remastered, and there's some live albums, there's some bootlegs, some demos, and obviously re-released songs. So very interesting. I know that we've done a couple of shows in the past on Fleetwood Mac and Peter Green, but it put me in a position over the last sort of 6 months to balance Peter Green out in comparison to Eric Clapton. And I don't mind making that comparison or that balancing act, because I think if you are a student of the British blues phenomena, they are going to be two fulcrums. Would that be fair to say? Two pivot points?
Oh, completely. Yeah. Oh, I think that they're both Green and Clapton being two of the greats. But absolutely. But Peter Green is not like Clapton, I would say. He's not a copyist of Clapton by a distance. But
no, and the good thing about, I suppose, Peter Green, after doing a bit of research in preparation for this show, is that Peter Green and John Mayall purposely went out to make sure that Peter Green wasn't going to be a clone when he was in John Mayall. So, for example, they never played Hideaway. Hideaway was Eric Clapton's song.
Yep.
So instead of doing Hideaway, what did they do? They went and picked another
Freddie King instrumental.
Freddie King song called the Stumble. And so he made the Stumble his song. Another little bit of interesting information that I picked up that I wasn't aware of is that Peter Green, Simon, didn't rehearse, didn't learn any of Eric Clapton's songs. He just went and played them.
So he didn't learn the solos, is what we're talking about.
No, he just played them.
Yeah. I think that's pretty smart. I think that's absolutely right. There's no point, he's not a Clapton copyist. There's no point in just learning the songs off by rote, because that isn't you. You obviously learn the basics of the song, but all the solos and all the riffs and all the things, you play them for yourself, don't you? Play your own. I wonder if he got some stick for not because for me the analogy is about being in a covers band. When you're in a covers band, do you, as opposed to a tribute band or something like that, do you when you're in a covers band, do you play the song exactly as it is, or do you kind of have a bit of artistic license so you can do your own thing within it? In terms of, you might do your own sort of solo around what is produced, what the real song has, But I'm of the opinion that you do something for yourself a bit as well. So I think that's, I think if you're following Eric Clapton, what you do is not play Eric Clapton, do you? That's a smart move, not to do that. Have a similar thing with the Stumble rather than, which I think that's cool. That's a good idea.
One of the good things, though, that we have is that we have a musical legacy there to prove that point. I don't have the records, but on Spotify, again, about a year ago, they released Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Peter Green playing live with John Mayall in '67. And half the songs are the songs that they recorded on the Blues Breakers album, but very clearly sounding similar, but not. You know, like Double Crossing Man, Double Crossing Time, for example. Certainly, when you listen to Eric Clapton's version, you know straight away it's Eric Clapton. But if you guys haven't checked it out, Peter Green's version is straight away, you know, it's Peter Green.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, that's, you know, obviously, you know, if the Beano album is your best known album, you have to do some stuff from it, but you don't have to. I mean, the whole thing about blues, isn't it? It's never slavishly copying things. It's making things your own. You know, I'm going to do, you know, whatever, but I'm going to make it my own. I'm going to bring what I do to that particular song. And I'm going to make that song sound like one of mine, which I think that's in the morning, Mickey Settlemire. How you doing? Crack babies. It's you know, it's so I mean, I think, you know, that's right, and that they do that. And, you know, if you're going to have to do, you know, half an album where Eric played on, the thing to do is not to be like Eric, isn't it? To be like you. And, you know, Peter Green's got enough of his own voice by a long way to you know, to make that make that happen.
So this is the album here. If you guys haven't checked, yeah. So that's available on vinyl, CD, but it's also on Spotify. So very, very good example of how the blues is played, especially in the that English tradition, where it's obviously identifiable for the paying punters who are, you know, going to the clubs, because that's what it's about. What's really interesting, though, is in this biography here, and there's another one that's coming out that you alerted me to, Simon, that's been worked on at the moment. But what's interesting in this biography here is that John Mayall noticed financially a big difference for about 3 months after Eric Clapton left. The attendance to the gigs was about 50% down, you know, because everyone wanted to go and see Eric Clapton. And it didn't take long, though. You know, 3 months, I suppose. Is that a short time in rock and roll history? Yeah, hard to say, but
well, even then, 3 months is pretty. Yeah. What, in 3 months, Peter Green had properly replaced Clapton and made it his own, and yeah. Well, just, you know, you know, you cannot deny Green's talent, can you? You know, whatever else, Mickey. You can't say that Green is in any way inferior to Clapton. He's just different, and that's, you know.
Yeah.
But, you can see why John Mayall was going, it's not going to be a problem. I've got somebody just as good as Eric.
Yeah, what one of the interesting things that I picked up on, and I didn't realise this, but the Fleetwood Mac guys were anti these jazz-influenced solos. They couldn't understand why Cream, for example, who were considered, you know, a little bit snooty, and I use that word from this biography. Yeah, you know, so we're being critical of Cream here. We're being critical of Cream, but they were considered snooty by a lot of people in the musical industry, especially because they were interested in fusing elements of jazz. Now, a lot of the blues guys didn't get it, didn't understand it, couldn't understand why you would want to spend 5 or 10 minutes just showing off doing a solo, which I think is pretty interesting, because I didn't realize that for years, Simon. I didn't realise that to use a Rolling Stones and Beatles comparison, the Rolling Stones were Fleetwood Mac, and to an extent, Cream were the Beatles. That's the way they were marketed for a little while. Cream were were wearing flash designer clothes, Carnaby street fashion. Fleetwood Mac were turning up in tennis shoes and jeans and t-shirts, Simon.
Yeah. There's a really good. Actually, that's a really I never sort of thought of that before. It's a really good parallel, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it
kind of puts
fits,
it into. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you guys something, and obviously yourself too, Simon, in the chat. So I didn't realise this. I read in Clapton's biography that one of the reasons why Cream went to these long solos in the first place was not because they were jazzers, because they didn't have a set. They didn't have, they couldn't. They didn't have enough songs to play for an hour. So what they did is they said, okay, well, what do you do, Simon? You stretch your song out. So in a way, it was only financially the reason why they did it. It wasn't because they were aristocratic.
No, it's fear. It's the clock thing, isn't it? How long have we got? Well, we've been contracted for an hour and a half. Yeah, we've only got 6 songs. Oh, don't worry, keep playing at the end. It'll be fine. I'll let you know. I think that's right. It's I think Hack asked us, which do we prefer? Do we prefer Green or Clapton? Oh, I'm not making a choice there.
Yeah, I can't answer that at the moment.
I think they're different players. I don't prefer Green over Clapton or Clapton over Green. I think they're both great guitar players. Bring their own thing. I think that they went in different directions, but still, the stuff that Peter Green did with Fleetwood Mac, I think is majestic. Oh well. Green Manalishi, Man of the World, all those great Albatross, that are stretching the blues thing out, into other directions completely. But, Cream, one of the seminal, we've discussed on here, one of the seminal kind of blues rock bands. I think it's just they're different players doing different things, and I wouldn't choose between them. I don't think one is better than the other, and I don't like one better than the other. I have both their records in my collection, and happy to have them. Lucky to have them.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you. What do you think?
For a long time, Simon, I was a Clapton nut, and blinkered. But I would like to think for good reason. I was blinkered in the sense that I wanted to learn as much as I could off this guy as a guitar player. Now I think most of us in the chat are guitar players, so I think I'd get some support there, rather than having 15 or 5 or 3 people that you want to be influenced by to draw, because we've got time, constraints. So what am I going to do? I'm going to focus on this guy. So for a long time for me, it was Eric Clapton, but I was listening to Eric Clapton selfishly, only for what I could learn to play.
Yeah.
When I started listening to the British blues music scene from a fan's point of view again, from a music lover's point of view, I was hearing things, Simon, differently, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah. We start hearing the context, don't you? It's not just one thing. You start hearing a context. You start hearing the broader context of which all of these people are operating in. Green, Clapton, how they're developing, what they're doing, and their development was amazing, really, wasn't it? If you think about it, and we talked about it on here, over those 2 or 3 years, going from John Mayall's Blue Pressure to Cream, to Fleetwood Mac, and everything that Fleetwood Mac did, and those, with Peter Green, and his, amazing, as I just said, those amazing songs that he produced. Albatross, Oh Well, and all those. I think of taking the blues somewhere else. Really, probably places that people are still not taking it now.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize this again too, Simon, until I started listening to a lot of live records and live recordings. And again, we've got Spotify and YouTube to thank to give us this information, because we wouldn't have had it otherwise. But Fleetwood Mac, Simon, are two bands. I didn't realize this. So again, Peter Green's pretty smart. He agrees with Vernon. Let's get Jeremy Spencer on, and Jeremy Spencer can be the opening act. So he's going to play his slide, and he's going to do those Chuck Berry numbers.
Yeah.
That rock and roll kind of rev up the crowd. Elmore James stuff.
Yeah, Dust My Broom and all of that.
Yeah. And then Peter Green's going to come on after, he's done a set of 4 or 5 songs. I didn't realize this too. Maybe you did. And then Jeremy Spencer would go and sit down with the crowd and watch Peter Green play, do his set. And then when they got Danny Kerwin on, Kerwin, when they got Danny into the band, it was the same thing. So they'd have they'd be playing guitar for Jeremy, and he'd do his set. They'd have an intermission, and then they'd do the Fleetwood Mac songs with Danny. Then they'd have another intermission, and then they'd finish off with a jam. Again, I didn't realize that. And if you look at Cream as an example, they were just doing one set.
Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah. That kind of fluidity about reminds you of. I went to see Bob Dylan with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and Roger McGuinn from the Byrds. So Roger McGuinn started, and he did some songs on his own, and then he got. You can't no better backing band than the Heartbreakers, So the Heartbreakers backed him up. Then the Heartbreakers did some stuff on their own, and then they backed Bob Dylan. So it was kind of went round, that similar sort of thing. But no, I hadn't realised that Jeremy Spencer did that sort of that they. Who was listening to? Who was saying that they sort of they were their own support act? I was like, who was that? I can't remember who it was. It'll come to me. But I was listening to them, they were saying that they got somebody to be a support. Only it was them. They were kind of dressed up to be their own support band. Cheaper.
Actually, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to describe what Jeremy was doing from the word go. He was Peter Green's support act. He was, that's. So this view that I had in my mind for 20 years that they were a gigging band together, with Peter over here and Jeremy over here, it's not correct.
Or like so many things, it's half correct. It's not. It doesn't take into account that kind of full view of you.
Yeah.
And actually thinking about it more recently, I went to see the Brothers Landry. I talked about it on here, and the keyboard player on that was the support act. He had he did a little 45 minutes on his own. He had his own songs and just played the guitar and stuff, and then he came back as part of the band. Kind of what we say, long tradition of of people being the support act, but also being in the main band as well. Well, it makes for it's good, isn't it? You can stretch it a bit further, bring your own support act, but the support act is part of the band, depending on what you're doing. So. I was just looking at at this John Mayall's Blues Breakers live in '67. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me is they're doing "I Can't Quit You, Baby," which is obviously Led Zeppelin have done, but I bet it's not. I don't know it, but it's not like the Led Zeppelin version.
No, no,
You know,
no, no,
but
no,
that's my
no,
point.
no,
You
no.
know, same song but different take on it completely.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Which I think is
I yeah, I'm just captivated by the album, and again, I suppose one of the great things that we have to be careful of is that we don't get used to these nice, delicately remastered recordings. You know, they're great to have. Um, and why not take advantage of the technology that's out there?
is it
You've got
what's
all
the
these
sound
different
like on
formats.
it? What's the sound
Oh,
like on it?
yeah, it's
Is it
good.
really good?
It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Look, I'm not a vinyl snob, Simon. I've got a I've got a shitload of records, a shitload of CDs, and I don't mind listening to digital, streaming. I just, I just run with it all. Yeah.
Yes, great Vanzini. They're all looking for a good stolen lick. Yes, absolutely. Well, it's that recycling of licks, songs, riffs into other things. It's hardly ever happened at all, has it? As we've discussed on here many times. I think the blues has always been like that, isn't it? The blues has always been recycling something and the song into another song, calling it something slightly different. Making it your own.
Well, yeah. If you look at some of the songs here that they've recorded, over half of them, "Lazy Poker Blues," "Have You Ever Loved a Woman," "Willie and the Hand Jive," "Long Tall Sally." We've all heard those songs. "Madison Blues."
George
Yeah,
Thorogood and the Destroyers. Yes.
"Homework." It's just phenomenal. How these guys just captivates me. How these English guys were listening to records and then absolutely feeling comfortable, Simon, right away to put their own version onto these songs. The Rolling Stones did it, Clapton did it, John Mayall, Fleetwood. They just had absolutely no problem in making it their own.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, yeah. But also, no problem in doing them. Just because somebody else has done them, I'm still going to do them. But we do it like this. And I think that's good. You work out the song, work out what you're going to do, and then you put it through the filter of your band, and it comes out sounding like you. And I think that's the art of it, isn't it? To me, that's the art of a good cover version. Is that you put it through the prism of your band, and it comes out sounding like you, what you would do with it.
So, do you think that's indicative of the British blues movement in the late 1960s? We've spoken about this a lot of times. It's been reported by a lot of other authors and indeed by these artists themselves that it was almost religious-like when they first heard the blues. They had to take this out. They were missionaries to this music that was fantastic. So the fact that the Rolling Stones was recording or playing a song that Clapton, or Peter Green was doing, that didn't matter. What mattered was that they were singing a black African blues song to British audiences, and that's the most important thing. The fact that your band was covering it and my band didn't matter. It was the fact that we were singing it.
No, I think that's right. It didn't matter that your band was covering it and my band was covering it. The fact that that there was a certain evangelical kind of educational edge to this. You're saying, look at this, look what I've discovered. Isn't it really great? So I think you're right. I mean, it's an interesting point that there is that evangelical, taking, because in those days you wouldn't have heard it on the radio. There would have been no radio play of these songs. Not the black artists who did them.
So what were they hearing, Simon? What was an 18-year-old English guy hearing to make him want to go and pick up a guitar and play?
You mean what in terms of like Keith Richards or you and me?
Yeah, or Peter Green, or what were these guys in the late 1960s hearing in these songs
It's
that
early
made
mid
them want?
60s, really, isn't it? It's early mid 60s, right? Really, rather than that. Well, there must be some identification with it, And it's an interesting point, isn't it? That Eric Clapton, particularly, that had at that time, as we've sort of discovered in these programs, it's a fairly disjointed upbringing, and always thought of himself as a bit of an outsider and stuff. So, that to me is what he hears in the blues, is what he feels inside him. It has that emotional connection, And it sounds a bit weird, for a white, lower middle class guy coming from, southwest of London to connect in that emotional way to songs of from the Black American experience. But nevertheless, that's what it was. When you hear it, and it creates something in you, and I think it's one of those things that all of those guys, Keith Richards, Clapton, all those guys, that love of that Black American music, that comes from an emotional response to it, hearing it and having an emotional response to it, and then having such an emotional response, you're saying, I'm going to take this out and play it to the people that I can.
So Peter Green, being a working class Jewish guy, would run those same parallels.
I think so. Yeah.
And I look forward to this new biography coming out, because I'd like to think maybe that they would draw the same conclusions that we might be talking about in the next couple of minutes. North London, butcher boy, working class, Jewish guy, not quite. And then I don't know the Jewish history in England, but, not quite in, not quite out, a little bit like, the African Americans in America, not quite in, not quite out.
Well, the 60s, the famous, it's quite easy to be an outsider in the UK in the 60s. The famous sign on lodgings, the places to let was, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs.
Sure.
Kind of thing. And,
sure.
So it's quite easy to feel a kind of outside of that if you're black, if you're Irish, or if you're a dog. Poor dogs. But that also other areas, there would have been quite a lot of anti-Semitism around. There's still now, but in the 60s, around working class,
So can I ask you another thing then?
That we have conspiracy theories about the Jews have run all the banks and run all the media, or whatever it is. This kind of thing. So,
okay. We won't go down there. But
no,
nonsense. I want to ask you something else to see if you've got an opinion, and anyone else obviously in the chat. So these working class guys, middle class guys, these guys with issues, we're listening to this music, identifying with it, recording, playing live to other English cats and other English girls, and they were finding something in this music that was resonating within themselves. Then you had this herd, this group mentality, didn't you? Where people were British blues lovers. They were going along to these crowds, to these gigs in big numbers. And this was before the individualism of the 1970s. So would you say that the freedom that these artists were experiencing themselves through listening to the music was being resonated by the listeners in England as well? Or was it just...
No, I think it's part of the zeitgeist. It's part of that whole kind of, the late 60s flowering of music, art, all the thing, fashion, all the things that, we've talked about. And there's part of that, absolutely is part of that. I think that, just going back a bit, that remember in the UK, the blues thing came out of jazz,
Sure,
and came out of skiffle, particularly. Skiffle.
Yep.
Roy Donegan copying Huddy Ledbetter, Leadbelly songs and all that. It was a sort of black songs of of the country, and so it's all filtering into that. And they're hearing it, and it has that, there's the blues clubs, and then people are hearing, as Great Manzini gives a point, that people will start to albums are starting to come in from America. As we know, one of the famous ways they came in was via the Cunard liners that cross the Atlantic. The people on the Cunard liners, people who worked on them, sailors and etc., would bring albums back, to sell them in this country.
Yep.
Knowing that they could, and that famous story about, that Keith Richards sees Mick Jagger with I can't remember which blues album he's under his arm, and they get together
in a Muddy's Water album.
That's it, Chuck Berry. He goes to talk to him because he's got a Chuck Berry and a Muddy Waters album under his arm.
Yeah, I don't want to talk to you. Give me your albums.
Yeah. Well, I've been the same ever since.
Hey, don't say. Hey, they could be watching the show, man. Don't say that.
Very bad. Sorry.
Oh, we didn't mean that, Mick. We didn't mean that, Keith.
Just a little bit cheeky.
Yeah,
just a little bit cheeky.
They might be watching the show, man.
Might be watching. Sorry, guys. Apologies. Headmaster Walton has told me I'm off a bit cheeky.
No, that's good. I'm glad you picked up on the joke.
Yes. Oh dear. I'm sorry, it was there to be made. It was there to be hit, wasn't it? It's like a half volley outside the off stump. Yeah. Come on in. Push. Off we go. I could do that. It's but I think that that it is all part of wrapped up in that kind of 60s zeitgeist, artistic zeitgeist that was going on then. In its broader context, the new post-war freedoms. People. And if you describe it in these terms, the 50s is a very black and white era, and when the 60s started to be colour. It's like turned on colour on television and stuff. And I think and it becomes very psychedelic. Is the word.
Do you think we can?
Late 60s.
Do you think we can really get that? I don't think we can really get that, Simon. I don't think we could get that black and white after war, post-war UK. Maybe you could. I don't. Well, you're not that old, so yeah. Yeah, but obviously it must have been a remarkable jolt for these guys. Must have been remarkable.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And it. No, you can't reproduce it. I mean, you couldn't reproduce it now because we've got all the media, the internet as
we got it all.
Yes, and that's not necessarily a good thing. We've got it all, and look, we still want more.
Yeah,
it's not enough. But then it was. But I think it's a really important point, isn't it? That then they had little morsels. You see somebody with a Muddy Waters album under their arm, and that's a connection. But that person hasn't got dozens of Muddy Waters albums. He's got one. He's maybe got Chuck Berry. And that's it. But and that famous story about I got the record, but I've got nothing to play it on. So I have to go round to my friend's house to go and play it. Or go around to somebody's house and saying, I understand you've got this record. Can I hear it?
Can I? Can I look at it?
Can I look at it? Sorry, can I look at it? Who was that? Who was that?
Yeah.
Was it?
He's that famous guy. You know him. Not the Crickets. It's his name is Peter. He's an English guy, and they did little ditty songs. And he went to someone's house and knocked on the door, and the mother answered that, and he said, apparently someone's got a Muddy Waters album here, and she called out to the son, and the guy came to the door, and he said, can I have a look at it?
So yeah, I can't remember who Life of Me is. It'll come anyway. But it
was the guitar player that Eric Clapton played with in the Roosters. Tom McGuinness. Tom McGuinness.
Was it Tom McGuinness? Oh, okay, yeah.
So
which is one of the.
So
but
it's a little bit
the romance of that story, the astonishing bit about a story that we cannot get in the internet age that we now live in. That kind the mystique of those records, the mystique of and the mindset of saying that I'm going to go around to somebody's house and I'm going to ask to see it, like the Holy Grail. It just, well, it takes. I don't want to be too far this, but it does take on a sort of iconic status. It has an iconography, which. Iconography. That's it. Iconography that you cannot do these days, can you? You cannot think of an album where somebody comes around to your house. Can I look at it?
Simon.
It's
Simon. Simon. We all have a sense of the sacred in ourselves as individuals. we all have a sense of the sacred. So
apologies for anyone who's religious, by the way.
No. I'm not being religious, but it depends what's sacred to you. Yeah.
But it takes on that kind of, that kind of, doesn't it? You go, can I look at it? You've described that to somebody of 20 now. It's just that it's something you cannot understand. You can't really comprehend. I mean, I think, I love that. That kind of the veneration in which those things were held. Individual records. And that individual record will fire up somebody to be a creative force, to go away and learn them, go out and play them, take them, on tour out to, people, for them to listen to hopefully get into the same thing as you. It's all about acceptance and about here. I've discovered this really cool thing. I think you should all hear it. Pay attention.
Yeah. Well, it's like Peter Green when he first started. Being interested in music, it's the classic story, Simon. He was hearing the stuff. He borrowed his brother's guitar, and sooner rather than later, it became his guitar because he was clearly better, at it than his brother. Then he gets an opportunity to play bass in a band because he's got this burning desire, Simon. After listening to this music for a couple of years, he has this burning desire, Simon, not just to listen to the music, but to get on stage and perform. He needs to get whatever's in him out. And the way that he wants to do that or can do that is through the music on stage in front of an audience. Now, for a shy guy, a notoriously shy guy, isn't that remarkable?
It is remarkable, but also it is, if you're an outsider, one of the things you will want is some kind of acceptance.
Sure.
And if you found something, I found this cool thing, right? I found this really cool thing. So I'm a guitarist, so I'm learning guitar. So one of the things you want from an audience is acceptance, He's really cool. Look at that. He's playing guitar. He's really cool. Listen to that, and a common understanding that you both really like this art, this art form, this musical form that I've discovered and I'm taking out to you, and people go, wow, that's really cool. Because all of a sudden, as you say, Eric, from being this painfully shy, outsider type, is thrust into the limelight. And I know he wasn't necessarily that keen on it, as I think, but it fostered an acceptance, within a group of people, whether it's in a band, with an audience. You're fostering an acceptance of you as a person, aren't you? Which I think is probably quite important if you're a bit of an outsider.
Well, Clapton
and you would have felt
thing.
that outsider status in school and all those other things,
Yeah. Clapton says the same thing. That was the only thing that he was good at that people would stop and look at when he had that acoustic guitar, he found out very early that he had this pretty good ability to play what he was listening to. And people were telling him, wow, Simon, what you're playing sounds just like Big Bull Brunsey on the tape deck. So but it just amazes me again, and I've got to ask you this. So these post-war Brit guys with no guitars hardly love this music. They're hearing a form of music. So what do? They become skifflers. They get a bloody a washboard. They get a pole with a for their bass.
T-chest bass, yeah.
If you're lucky enough, you've got a guitar. And some spoons.
It only had an acoustic, spoons for rhythm.
And away they go.
That's right, and it's cheap. It's all acoustics. You don't need PAs. You don't need lots of electronic equipment. You don't need. It's not very loud, so you can practice it anywhere, pretty much. In your front room, in your wherever, without disturbing it. It has. It's a DIY thing, as you say, besides the acoustic guitar. You made a T-chest bass by getting a T-chest from your local greengrocer who'd be chucking it out. So it's quite, you borrow your mum's washboard. It's very kind of DIY. As I say, all those things, but what it means is that, in this country, it became a sort of youth culture thing. The youth culture thing, which all that stuff led out of, and all those guys play. When they were in the school, as we said on here, there were thousands of in school,
thousands of
skiffle bands, thousands.
Yes,
because it was really it's really easy to play 3 chords, 2 chords, T-chest bass, something you build yourself, all of that stuff. So I think that you can't underestimate that how that kind of simplistic DIY element to that really fed into, and then
but you had this competitive nature though too, because you had streets. I was going to say, you had 3 or 4 bands in a street, and what they would do apparently is they would get together and they would see who was going to be the best band. Was it going to be Simon's band or Andrew's band?
Skiffle off.
Yeah. So
So
these guys that went and made it were the cream. Obviously, Jimmy Page, Clapton,
Peter Green, Beck,
Jeff Beck, all these guys that went on to become these electric blues giants were the cream, rose to the top.
Yeah, but they rose to the top because one, they were good, but two, and I think particularly we know with Clapton, and I'm sure that that kind of scholarly, he spent 6 months in John Mayall's house, didn't he? Listening to John Mayall's blues collection, and that 6 months of training, if you like, listening to them in detail, learning things, understand how they're played, what's playing, you're trying to build up your own library of licks and riffs and all of that. It's that studious nature, that drive to succeed. That's the other bit. Talent is one thing. There are lots of talented people who don't make it because they don't have the drive. And there are lots of not so talented people who make it because they have massive amounts of drive, not because they're the best. And
so why don't we hear
90% sweat, 10% talent is an oft quoted phrase.
We don't tend to hear that a lot now. In Keith Richards' biography, he talks about that. He doesn't make any bones about the fact that they had drive and they had a bit of talent, but they were going to make it. That's one of the reasons why they went to Edith Grove, so they could make it as a band. They were definitely going to go and have that drive. Eric Clapton doesn't talk about that a lot in his book. Maybe he's been a little bit humble because of the 30 years of selfishness that he'd experienced and pushed on to a lot of other people. His biography is more of a mea culpa, I suppose, more of a brief history.
A confessional.
Yeah. Bit of a confessional. But you don't tend to hear that a lot, and I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear why did Jimmy Page want to drive Led Zeppelin?
I think that they all, they were all ambitious, all those guys. I mean, I think it's clear that he may not say it, but that Clapton was ambitious. He went from the Yardbirds to John Mayer's Blues Breakers. Very clear idea of what he wanted to do there with the kit and everything, and then he went to Cream. You could see in very, as we've discussed, very short periods of time. You're not spending 10 years in a band. And that must be, some of that is a drive to succeed, to get to the next level, to take it to the next level, to explore. Some of it's creative. It's a creative drive to explore what you've got and what you can do with it. I've got this new thing called the blues, not new, but, to them. And so where am I going to take it? So you do what I would call a fairly traditional, blues, sort of Chicago blues type electric blues album in Beano album. But then what are you going to do next? You're going to do another one? No, you're going to go and form Cream with these with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, who are jazz musicians, come from a jazz background. And you're going to part of that is the improvisation thing. Where does the improvisation thing take me? Part of it is not having enough songs to do an hour and a half, but a lot of that is that's what they wanted it to be. They wanted that to be that improvisational thing. And I think that, with Jimmy Page, learnt all that stuff as a session musician, but obviously had to, then wanted to form a band. But it's very clear that Jimmy Page is the leader of Led Zeppelin, in my book. As we discussed last week, he paid for the recordings himself, or him and Peter Grant. He produced those albums himself, not anybody else, from what he'd learned. I mean, and he knew where he wanted it to go. He had a very clear idea about whether he nicked it from Jeff Beck or they had it the same idea. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, to be honest. The fact that he saw that was a thing. I think probably following on a bit from the Cream thing, improvisational thing, longer pieces, blues riffs, but taken in a different direction, making them your own. Sorting out, introducing some in Jimmy Page's thing, introducing some English folk stuff into it. But he's got tremendous drive. Jimmy Page in those early years to succeed, and I think that's the same with all of them. I mean, some of it must be about the fact that I'm on a roll. That they. That famous quote that Ringo Starr, if I get a couple of hairdresser shots out of it, I'll be like, I think there's also there's that drive to go, well, how long is it? Nobody looked at it as a 50-year career. It's like we better make some money now because nothing might be happening next year. Do you know what I mean? As a kind of
Well, I've got this theory, and I'm going to just throw it in here now, and we'll probably elaborate it a little bit later on when we discuss the Beano album again, because one of us will be mentioning that album in our top 5. Okay, clearly.
I'm leaving it to you.
Okay, all right. So I've got this theory that I'm going to ask you now that I would like you to think about. Eric Clapton joined Cream for the reason that he wanted to learn off Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce. It had nothing to do with Eric Clapton joining the group being an equal. It had everything to do with Eric Clapton being surrounded by these two great jazzers. That was the next progression for Eric Clapton. He realized that he couldn't do another Beano album, like you said, Simon. So he from the word go didn't join Cream as a equal third. He went there to go, I'm going to learn from these guys. That's my theory.
Do you think so? Do you think he?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. I don't see it like that. I mean, I think that
he wasn't a jazzer. He wasn't a jazzer.
But by the same token, they'd played in blues band, so that the common denominator they've got is that they were great musicians. All three of Bruce and Baker, great virtuoso musicians. And I'm sure Clapton will have seen them in the Graham Bond organisation and stuff. And
you big time. Yeah.
And thinking to yourself, I could really make something with those guys because they're really, they are like, they're the cream, the cream of those musicians.
No. No, he wasn't thinking that. He was going, I got to get with those guys so I can learn and do what they're doing.
Do you think so?
That's my theory.
Okay. Yeah. I must say that I myself, I see it much more of I think Clapton had a sense even then. I mean, Clapton had a sense of his own worth and a sense of his own position in that thing. He must have done. I don't think you could be him and not realise that you were in the vanguard of that British blues rock movement. And you've done the John Mayall album. Where are you going to go next? Well, the next bit is you're going to get the other cream of the musician. The other.
He didn't realize
supergroup. There you are. There's my.
He didn't realize how important that Beno album was, Simon, until years later, until everyone else started telling him, until people were writing books and articles, and he and in fact he did the 70th birthday party, I think, gig with John Mayall. And that was the first time they played in years. And he's interviewed at the beginning of the gig saying, "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't put this album or my time with John Mayall into proper perspective. It was just a band that I was in. So that's why I'm thinking he saw Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce as something to aspire to."
Whereas I think that it's more collaborative than that. He recognised other excellent musicians and thought, I can really do something.
Back it up, Simon. Back it up.
It says here on page 94 of Clapton's autobiography that he was really impressed by Baker's playing and wanted to form a group with him as a collaborative thing. So there.
Yeah.
Look at that. Dr. Pinocchio's there.
Yeah.
Making
Sounds good.
I know. It's plausible, at least. 94 of his autobiography is much too early, by the way. But
yeah. Well, certainly one of the things that I do, and look, at the end of the day, we can only take these guys at their word, So if they say something in an interview, that's reputable, or in a biography, we certainly have to take it at their word. But I just think and I'll take you at your word. But I think it's phenomenal that these guys saw something, and it will always captivate me to the day that I die, that they saw something remarkable in relatively inexpensive recordings from across the Atlantic by these black guys that were just recording in front of a microphone, basically, Simon, with a cheap acoustic guitar. There was something resonating in these songs, and I suppose you and I will always be talking about this for as long as we do these shows. There was some kind of freedom there, some kind of spark that lit the zeitgeist for the 60s.
Yes, completely. And I think that, I firmly believe that that's true. That, and as I say, there's no greater way of lighting a spark than by having 25,000 skiffle groups. That's that means you did.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
Literally, I mean, that's the figure. But I think it was something crazy like that. I mean, it was literally dozens of tens of thousands. And to have that number, that means that so Lonnie Donegan, hats off to Mr. Donegan, for lighting that spark that ignited, because when you've got 30,000, whatever it is, however many groups it is, playing that music because it's easy. As I say, we've said it's relatively easy. You've got to have, basically 57 is about 50,000 skiffle bands in Britain. And so if you've got all of that, and you've got a really simple way of making a band and things like that, they got places to play, youth clubs and, hanging out. You can play a gig anywhere, can't you, if it's all acoustic? You don't need kit. Once you've got,
No.
it's very simple. At some point, that is going to ignite. If you're igniting 30,000 bands, that's a lot of people who have got interested in playing the guitar on a simple level and been dragged into it. And as we've just said, the cream then rises to the top. The people who are really good and can progress and can learn, have got good ears and all of that, progress. So Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, they rise to the top. They get very good. Great at their playing. And so I think that that our post-war kind of the colour is just starting to happen. There's a bit of post-war freedom. Things, their jobs are starting to become quite plentiful. People can move about in jobs. It's easy to get a job. It's easy to have money. And the teenagers, the baby boomers, so they're, if they're born in 46, they're 16 in 60, 61. 51, something like that. My maths is in it for 15. So they're becoming teenagers in the late 50s and early 60s. And then there's this stuff from America coming over, it's starting to get a bit of an American influence. You see pictures, you see stuff going on. It has, that post-war, people, I'm the arse end of the baby boomers thing, but, has that thing turning on the colour in the world, really, in a way that you can't imagine now. And I think it's all down to me to that kind of skiffle thing, and that the ability to have tens of thousands of people doing it. 10,000 people are drawn into this thing. Two things happen. One, you've got a load of musicians. Two, you've got a load of fans. If you've got a load of people who are fans of that music because they've been playing it, yes. If 5 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later, the Rolling Stones turn up, playing American rock and roll, American blues, that you've already got a link with it. I used to do that in that skiffle band. Let's go and see them.
Yeah.
So
I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Not only do you have ready-made musicians, but you have ready-made audience.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because that gives then an opportunity, because you're talking about how discretionary income becomes a big part of people's way of life back then. So naturally that gives a lot of the cream guys, and I use that pun cleverly here, gives the guys that have risen to the top, an opportunity to go out and buy, like Peter Green, a 59 Gibson Les Paul, which was a lot of money back then, to play a Marshall amp, which was, again, a lot of money back then, to go and play in venues live and loud, So
the key thing about that Marshall amp is he went to Jim Marshall and said, "Design me an amp that will go in my car."
Yeah, and
I think you can't invest in that.
Yeah, so Peter Green played that same amp too for a while. He played that 62 Blues Breaker. So that's the point that I want to make.
Did it belong to John Mayall? Did it belong to the Blues Breakers rather than Eric?
No.
Did he leave it behind when he left? Or they just got another one?
No. They just he played a 62 as well, a 62 Marshall JTM 45 himself when he was in the Blues Breakers after Eric Clapton, not Eric Clapton's one. Played that Marshall for a while, and I'm glad we're talking about a little bit of gear, because I'm looking at the time, so that's probably important too. So he played a Marshall for a little while, but he loved Fender amps. He loved the reverbs, because if you look at, or listen, I should say, to 90 to 70% of the songs on this album, and indeed anything else that they've got live, what's the constant thing, Simon, that Peter's playing? He's got a lot of reverb. He loves reverb, and that's one thing that the Marshall doesn't have, does it? Doesn't have any reverb. Those Fender Showmans that he was playing.
They do. No, that's right.
they were dripping in reverb.
Dripping in reverb. So I just found a really cool picture. I was just going to get some picture up just so people have some idea about what we're talking about here. Hold on, it's not great, but I might get some idea about what's going on here, because I think it's really important that if you're I'll just make this a bit bigger. So this is kind of what we're talking about here. So you can see that the T-chest bass in the middle there. There's a couple of guys with guitars, not plugged in. You'll notice, just playing acoustic guitar. So yeah.
And guess what? The audience would be singing the songs with them.
And look how old they are.
Yep.
They're all.
And look at the audience. Yeah. You know, there's parents there behind them.
Yeah, parents at the back. Yeah, grandparents at the back. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But that's yeah, great Vanzini. That's right. It was something ready to explode at the next level, and you know, they were able to.
Thank God for electricity. Great Vanzini. I don't know if you guys have seen it on Cadillac Records. It's not true, but it's a great scene. Muddy Waters is he's just moved up to Chicago, and he's got his acoustic guitar, and he's standing there on the street corner there playing his acoustic guitar, and no one's listening to him. You know, all these guys are going past in their suits, giving him crap, saying go back down to the Delta. And so this girl sees him, and she throws basically an extension cord down to him. And so the next scene is he's got this amp and his slide guitar, and he's blowing everyone away. And so that's how Chicago got the power. The girl threw the extension cord, Simon. Wow. But yeah, thank God for electricity.
Yeah, well, yeah,
otherwise we'd be skifflers.
Well, yeah. I mean, but all those things, Jim, Fender have been, producing electric guitars in the 50s. Jim and amps since the late 40s, since after the war. Jim Marshall starts producing amps in the UK because he's got all these requests from all these people who like Pete Townsend, etc. To produce proper amps so they can play. He produced something based on the Fender Bassman, which isn't the Fender Bassman because he can't get the parts. And so there's all that. He's got a load of it's all valves and transistors because it's all post-war wireless stuff basically. Old wireless is as in wireless as in radios.
Yeah.
Listen to the wireless. I do listen to the wireless. Listen to me. So I think that it's an astonishing kind of coming together of people, skills, technology, to enable these things to go forward. One driving the other. But Vox as well in this country. Producing things. Producing enough of things so that people can go out and play in bigger venues. That whole thing with I want an amp I can put in my car and I can go out and play. In sort of venues where I can be heard. I need something with a bit of clank to it, which I think is it's amazing that that as I said, that zeitgeist of all those things converging into not quite a single point, but converging into that the early 60s, the late 50s, and coming in and causing an explosion of music and talent.
Well, I don't have a copy of the book. It's too expensive for me to buy, and I won't do it. And it's not on Kindle, but I know there's a quote in there, and it's a reflection of an insight that you and I did during lockdown. And I'm quite amazed actually that you and I articulated this, because it's pretty good. It's good in the sense that organic fans can come to these conclusions and get it backed up. So Paul Kossoff basically said what you said a couple of months ago, one of the great things about him when he was going to watch Eric Clapton and these bands before he formed Free, or a band before Free, was that he was hearing these bands sound exactly the same as they were sounding on the records, and that was different. So that's how him and his friends saw a band as being authentic. If they were sounding like they were on the record, that was the band, Simon. If they were sounding completely different from their record, well, these guys were fakes. So you might remember, you and I, we thought that may have been an interesting thing that these guys liked, when they were going to these gigs. They were hearing this crunch, overdriven guitar, these guitars soaked in reverb. So, wow.
Yeah. I think, but I'm sure I've read on one of these things that one of the effect of Clapton touring with John Myers Brewster using that 50-watt Marshall was that almost wherever he played, wherever, like Paul Kossoff went to see, the week after they go and see him play, then they're going out and getting a Marshall and a Les Paul.
Exactly. That's exactly what he did.
Because that's the same, Kossoff. But I think the idea is that I think that it happened everywhere. Musicians all over the place bought themselves Les Pauls and Marshalls because that became the authentic sound that people wanted, as you so rightly say. Wow, that sounds like the Blues Breakers. God, he sounds like that on the record. Fantastic. So I think that, and I've certainly read that that there was that kind of sort of rolling effect of Clapton and his Marshall and his Les Paul, rolling through the country as he went and toured there, which I think is amazing.
So by default, then we had Fleetwood Mac doing the same thing, and if we indeed, you listen to any of the live versions of Albatross, okay, so they're playing Albatross with Les Pauls, but we all know for a fact that the original recording was done with the Strat. But it sounds remarkably good, the live version, Simon. So again, I'm going back to the point that you made a couple of months ago. There was some authenticity there. These guys were listening to that record, which became number one. Let's not forget that, an instrumental number one.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Yeah.
So you had these young articulated skifflers then, listening to this music going, wow. So they'd go and they're watching Fleetwood Mac and going, wow, this sounds great, Simon. Wow. That's what I love about the British blues. There is this seriousness to be authentic. From the recording right through to the performance.
And I think the interesting part is that seriousness comes from the genesis, which is the people who were who jazzers, the jazz people who started the clubs. They were very serious about it. So that when the Chris Barber band, in the interval, Lonnie Donegan would do the skiffle stuff. that seriousness transmitted itself or carried on in that sort of that curation of the blues, and Clapton being very serious, very studious and very serious students of Keith Richards, getting those records, working out what they were playing, trying to work it out, going over them again and again, putting the needle back, and all of those things, those tricky things you have to do when you've only got a record, playing them with a different, playing them at slower speed so you can try and work out what people are playing. This is all very studious and very, very serious. There is that serious edge that as you're right to say, that academic edge to it that parallels the kind of lots of other Alan Lomax going into the field to record to do this for the Library of Congress and all of that stuff. And in Britain there's there was a kind of folk thing in the 40s and 50s, collecting traditional folk songs, putting them in a place called Cecil Sharp House. It was a kind of curation of a serious curation of traditional music, and that people went out in the field and did field recordings of. that then feeds into that, you know, that those people got academic about it, you know, and you know, we talk about Clapton, and if we go to one of my other favourite bands, a Fairport Convention, you know, that's what they did. They went to Cecil Sharp House and looked up traditional English folk songs and decided that there were things that they could, you know, modernise in the same way, make their own. You know, which is another, you know, it's just another example of, you know, curation and a serious approach, academic approach to music, and you know, and that's picked up by these musicians who, you know, like Clapton, who had a serious academic approach to it.
It's got to a point now, Simon, where, you know, American blues music is a university course. You know, it's you can get a bachelor's degree in blues music, and there are a few books available that are part of the English unit to a blues degree. So, you know, the subjects that we're talking about now, you know, and I find it amazing that they are university subjects, and rightly so.
Absolutely.
Rightly so.
Yeah.
You know, it should be, because they're studying the blues music like if you're a geographer, you'll be studying blues music from a geography point of view. So, you know, how highways in Britain gave the opportunity for bands to do the circuit, you know, the Chitlin circuit in America, you know, so you can go and write a thesis on this, Simon, you know, and, you know.
I did. Do you know what?
Yeah.
I did. For my degree, I did a geography degree. I don't know if I told you this, but for my dissertation, for my geography degree, I did the spatial diffusion of jazz in America, blues in America.
Wow.
That was what I did.
Well,
I
did not know that.
In the early 80s. Well, in the early 80s. So there you are. I just,
okay.
I've got a piece of, I've got a piece of, your case is rested. No further questions, my lad. Here we are. I've got a trivia question for you. This is a bit of fun.
And that's not a stitch up anyone in the chat either.
No,
that's not a stitch up.
You didn't know
we
that,
didn't plan this.
But it's true. No, that's what I was doing 40 years ago. Oh, dear. Here we are. Now, what's the connection between Paul Kossoff? Can you make a connection between Paul Kossoff and the Rolling Stones?
No.
Okay, so Paul Kossoff had a cousin who was a model called Linda Keith, who dated Keith Richards.
Wow! I did not know that.
Yeah, a piece of nonsensical trivia that you know the sort of thing I really enjoy. Yeah, see.
That is wow! See just how tight that circle was, man.
Yes, absolutely. How tight, you know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? As a thing. But, sorry, not off topic, but it is very cool that as you say that, and I think that's one of the things that we need to be. You know, that how tight knit it was, and it wasn't this kind of huge kind of, you know, national explosion. It was pretty tight knit. You know, I mean, if you think about that original blues thing, it's London based. You know,
yep.
We know that.
We made that point during lockdown. You know, that London was everyone came to London. You know, the Newcastle bands came to London, didn't they? You know, everyone came to London.
Yeah. You know, but you know, there were a few clubs that you played, and you know, clubs to play and things, and places to go. But you know, it wasn't this huge. You know, the skiffle thing, you know, obviously died out by then. But it, you know, there wasn't millions of people then doing it by the 60s. You know, there were lots of local bands and things, I think. But, you know, it's still quite a, you know, I remember that, you know, I didn't start doing stuff till the early 70s. But, you know, that you could really pick up everything you needed to know about rock music and pop music from, you know, the NME. It could, in one paper, could encompass pretty much all of it, you know, at that level, to a certain level. Whereas now, you got not a chance. You know, you have a magazine and it would just concentrate on one genre. You know, you'd have enough to fill it all up. You know, and it's it's difficult to sort of think, people just releasing stuff all over the place. There's millions and millions of people producing music now, which is good, by the way. It's as egalitarian as it's ever been. That ability to create your own music and put it out, and on platforms and get it out to people and things like that. You don't, going back to, you don't make loads of money out of it, but you can make a living as a musician now. A lot of people make money, as a musician, in the same way as they probably did then. They weren't making loads of money in the early, those guys. I don't think, not until later when they started selling a lot of albums and things. But so I don't think they got paid. Well, we know from my own experience, that gigs, 75p to go to a gig, less than £1. Kids to go to a gig, to go and see whoever it was, Free, Black Sabbath, whatever it is, at my local hall, and it would be 50p, 75p. That's how much they cost. And so they weren't making millions of pounds out of touring, as we know, because promoters took quite a lot of it. And so I think that, but it's small, tight knit, people drifted from one group to another, Ginger Baker and, they, with Eric Clapton, they formed another group, there's very much, I don't know if you've ever seen those beautiful, I have mentioned them on here, there's a British artist called Pete Frame who did family trees, rock family trees. If you haven't seen them, look them up on, they're on the, you can see them on the internet, but they are beautifully hand drawn, kind of, with bands, with where all their members came from and where they went and stuff. Fantastic, they're fantastic pieces of rock art. So I think that's quite interesting. That it's you hold it in your hand, not quite, but but unlike now, you could cover it all in one shot, and which is cool, very cool. I think, and there weren't millions of things coming out. So it's quite, even though it's quite, you had to have to record something. You need a record company. You need to get a deal, get a record company, get a recording studio, because it's obviously quite difficult. It's not something you did at home. Because there wasn't any way of recording yourself at home with any degree of, not like now where you can make it on a computer, you can make great records using just computers, recording directly onto a computer, all of the stuff you need. Anybody can do it. I don't know if I'd like to make a record on this, but apparently you can. I'm not sure I'd want to, but I think it's the technology is a really important thing, but that ability, and that's why there's not millions of records from the '60s, because
I think that's probably maybe a future program that we can talk about. A little bit of the technology, how it's changed. I know that Dave has mentioned a few things in the chat over the years that we've been doing it, and it would be really nice to get him on because he's been to Abbey Road. It'd be nice to get one of these guys, to talk about technology, how it's changed. Not to a technical degree, Simon, but certainly, from a
completely,
from a guitar player's perspective, to talk about that, because we've spoken about amps and and guitars. And hey, look, I'm at an hour and 30, my friend.
Can we do just one more thing before we, just very briefly, just before we
sure,
before we go?
Before we go, if you guys enjoy anything that Simon and I have said, and you think our show is going to be interesting to anyone else, feel free to share us, and feel free anytime to jump on and ask to come on, because Simon and I will have anyone on to talk about anything that's important. So feel free to ask. So before Simon signs off, he's got something else to mention.
Well, Sonia brings up a lot of drugs and had gone from recording studios. Well, I think that's an interesting thing, Sonia, about whether actually there were actually loads of drugs in things, but that's a show. No. I just wanted to say, to mark the. I don't know if you saw this. The passing of a woman called Fiona Adams. Now, Fiona Adams might not know her name, but she was a photographer in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
And she took a lot of photographs, including, I'll get this one up, and including this one.
Well, thanks, Julia.
So she took this photograph.
Yeah, that's famous.
So what's that? I've got it here.
It's the Beatles,
which is the cover of
Hard Day's Night. Twist and Shout. Oh,
Twist and Shout single. So that's the cover, and she took that photograph, and she just died. So she took a lot of took photographs of she took a lot of photographs of other people, Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan photographs, and a lot of photographs of people in the 60s. But I thought marking her passing was a cool thing, because she did, as I say, took a very cool shot. Iconic shot of the Beatles. Apparently they went to this. This is an old bomb site, right? They just went to this bomb site, and just with no regard to health and safety of any description whatsoever, go on top of this bombed building and jump up and down. Which I think is truly wonderful, don't you? It's like scant regard for, nowadays you'd be like, oh, is he going to fall down? Is he going to? It's like, just go out there and jump on this, on this ruined building, see if it falls down or not. No, her name didn't ring any bells with me, Great Vanzini, either.
Great Vanzini makes a good point, though. Look at that.
Yeah.
Hey?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. What? So, wow.
2 tracks and 4 tracks. Yeah. And Sgt. Pepper's 2 4-tracks chained together.
Holy cow.
Not even an 8-track yet. But, oh, yeah.
So you can do it from your phone, Simon.
No intention of doing it from my phone. But anyway, she's worth looking up, because she's got some other famous images and stuff that she took, which is really, I thought as she took that iconic picture of the Beatles on Twist and Shout, that we should mark her passing.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yeah.
So if anybody hasn't listened to Fleetwood Mac, go out and listen to it. Next week, Simon's going to present his album.
That's it. Album number 2. Hold on a sec.
Yeah, I told you this series was going to drag on. We're not going to do. I told you we weren't going to do 10 albums in one show.
At this rate, we're not going to do 10 albums in 10 shows.
But no, I look forward to you. And I like the fact too that we're surprising each other too, because that's good. That's maybe gentle surprises. But that's always a good thing. That's always a good thing to not be too scripted.
Yeah. Good morning, Julia Baldassari. Pronounce your name correctly, Julia.
Yeah, she's been on our chat a few times. I think a couple of months ago, Julia was on. But we're wrapping up, Julia. So if you want to save our channel one more thing.
Yeah, no, sorry, I only got one more thing. Only this is a bit self-regarding, but I think it's really cool. So this is a book about my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
Which my mum bought last week. So he's called Randall Swingler. He's my mum's dad. And he was a poet, writer, soldier in the Second World War.
Well, can you talk about that for 10, 15 minutes next week? Would that be okay?
Yeah. If you don't think it's too self-regarding, complain.
No, well,
it's not. But interestingly, he was, writing and part of the radical left movement in the UK after the war, the 40s and 50s. So it's a kind of parallel thing. But I think there are with what we're talking about, especially the 50s, in the 50s and 60s, and that kind of growth of Britain and stuff, you know, and the gradual colorization of it. But if you don't mind, it's all right.
Yeah. If you want to do a presentation next week before you jump into the album, why not? Right. I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Just
all right.
Yeah, no, but I just thought it was a really cool thing, and it's not often. I don't know about it's not often you get your grandfather's name on a book, is it? Kind of.
No.
So cool.
I look forward to hearing about your granddad next week. He's a handsome fella.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Oxford rowing blue. There you are. But,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Fantastic.
If you'd like to sign off for us, my friend, I've got a couple of things I've got to do. So I appreciate everyone joining us. Oh, what have I done?
Sorry. That's all right. Turning up at the end. So great Vanzini as well, and Sonia. Thanks, guys, and Julia Baldessari. Who else do we have? Mickey Settlemeyer as well. Great Vanzini and Guitar Hack as well. Various. So thanks all for dropping by and your comments and things. Really good. I think we've had a really good chat. I hope I got everybody. And and we'll see you next week for the third instalment of Andrew my blues albums, British blues albums.
Now we appreciate you people joining us and
we're done
be
by
safe.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, guys, stay safe and well out there. It's it's getting a bit hairy. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Right, take care.
Please. Especially our North American friends.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Great Vanzini. Looking at you. Bye, guys. Take care.